Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Blown Zone episode 44, Money for Nothing. Here with Brad. How are you, Brad?
I am never better, although somewhat worn out from writing and getting this outline tuned in today. Anyway, how about yourself?
Yeah, maybe this time I've just been slightly better because this was a tough one
It
to get ready.
was indeed.
Got a pretty cool bumper script. I'm going to slam it out right now. Ready?
Great. Let her rip.
Here we go. In a natural world, human labor produces value, and advances in resource extraction, production, and transportation have increased the value of human labor such that costs of goods and services should come down over time. And yet, just the opposite seems to happen. Everything seems to become more expensive. Why is that? In this podcast, we look at the Babylonian money magic that steals your money, transferring it directly to governments and beyond. You work your butt off while they sit on their butts and get money for nothing. If you're willing to admit it, this is literally human sacrifice. The more the value of your labor is decreased, the more your labor is sacrificed for them. And this Babylonian money magic is powered by one thing: our fear. More fear awaits, more intense and more frequent, and thus it is time to become brave, courageous, unafraid.
Booyah. Amen.
Poetic.
Indeed. I second that motion.
Okay, okay.
All right.
You want to kick into the premise, Brad?
Well, yeah, there's a thousand different directions we could go with this, and it's one of the reasons Matt and I struggled to get a script together here, an outline. At one point, we had 8 to 10 pages worth of stuff, and we were going every which way. And there's a million things you could talk about, but I kind of want to get to what I think is the most important. 5, 10 years ago, I could have talked to you for hours about why this chart and this graph and the finances were going to go this way and that way. And I believed it all. And there were a million predictions made about this, that, and the other, and almost none of them came true. So eventually I had to give up on that and come up with a different theory as to what was going on. And the one thing that's consistent, whether you're listening to, the establishment, mainstream media, government, conspiracy theorists, or, all the different financial and economic gurus out there, is they're all constantly selling us fear in one form or another. And, it's this fear that drives this Babylonian money magic trick, as I like to call it. And we're hoping by the end of this podcast that some of our listeners will see what's going on and choose not to participate in the fearful narrative that's going to come from almost every direction, no matter who you're listening to, and choose to not be in fear. And that's the goal. And we'll try to explain this system a little bit, how it works, why it works the way it works, and what we can do to ride through what's clearly going to be an attempt to scare us again as the value of this currency that we call money continues to diminish over time. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, this podcast is going to be on one level, kind of like describing things that are happening, and on a deeper level, providing some level of empowerment to, as we said, become brave, courageous, and unafraid of propaganda, fear mongering about money.
That is the plan. It looks like we've got a few definitions here. Yeah, kind of a review.
Yeah, we got like a
And
system review of like what's going on, right? So we're going to talk about things like Federal Reserve, and we're going to talk about money and things like that. These kind of topics. So we want to lay out some definitions first. You want
all
to
right,
lead off with those, Brad?
the basics. Yeah, and as the bumper script suggested, right, this fear is what drives it. And our fear is because of our ignorance, right? It's because of what we don't know. And this Babylonian money magic trick is really very simple. Like a 10-year-old could figure this out and pull it off. So it isn't complicated, but it's due to our ignorance and our misuse of words, the power of words, that allows them to pull off this trick. It's as simple as that. And got to start with this word money, right? Money. is what we all think we have, right? We have these digits in our bank accounts, or we have these green bills stuffed under our mattresses, and we've been brainwashed into calling this money. And there are a lot of different properties of money that we could go over, but there's one key property that all those digits in green bills lack, and that is that they're not a store of wealth. In other words, if you had $1,000 in 1940 and you stuff it under your mattress, right, you could have bought a car with $1,000 in 1940, probably a nice car, right? A Model T or something. But today, right, you can't even buy the worst used car on the market for $1,000, right? Today, that Model T costs $70,000. And nothing changed, right? You just pulled those $1,000 out of the mattress 80 years later. Nothing's changed with those dollars. They're still dollars, right? It's still $1,000. But you can see that your wealth was not stored in those dollars. Make sense?
Makes perfect sense. I mean, the easiest thing to understand is that the value of the dollar has gone down like 99% since 1913. I
Right.
can
And
imagine
it's
that.
not, that's right. And that we'll talk about that word dollar here in a second, right? But what you have, right? What that person stuffed in their mattress 80 years ago was 1,000 currency Federal Reserve notes, or IOUs. That's what it was. That's what it is. Technically speaking, to be fair for the people who are onto this, you could have exchanged those Federal Reserve notes for gold up until 1971. Now, they revalued gold and kept the price stable artificially all those years, but it still had that intrinsic value of human labor and extracting gold and so forth. But in 1971, when they decoupled the dollar from gold and the convertibility of it, then it truly went to a state of complete and utter worthlessness in reality. But they still called it money, and that's one of the reasons that this Babylonian magic trick is able to perpetuate. And so you'll hear a lot of people, financial pundits, they'll call these things we call money in dollars, they'll call it fiat currency today. And fiat really means by decree of the authorities. So it's because our authorities, otherwise known as the government, call this stuff money and call it dollars, that we all buy into it. They declare this bill with a picture of George Washington on it is a $1 bill, and we have to go along with it, right? They have all the guns and all the power. How they got all the guns and power is another story, but that is what fiat means. So what we have is a fiat currency. That's the US dollar. And of course, all the global currencies from every nation around the world are pegged to the dollar, meaning their value is based on the value of this US dollar. We won't go into the details of Bretton Woods and so forth. It's not important. I want to get that idea across that you don't have any money, you have fiat currency, and you don't have any dollars, right? The word dollar was defined officially by the original American government. I think it was 1792. It was called the Money Act of 1792 or something. They defined the word dollar, which we actually took from the Spaniards, and it was defined as 371.25 grains of silver. That's what a dollar is officially, the definition of it. And when the Babylonian money magic trick got perpetrated on us, and it started in the 1870s, then the Federal Reserve in 1913, you could still trade that Federal Reserve note for 371.25 grains of silver for a period of time. And then when they took away that convertibility, they just didn't change the definition. So they still called their note a dollar. Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
So we don't have any dollars and we don't have any money. We have free floating, manipulatable fiat currency, what we have, what we put all our hard work and labor in for. That brings me to this word inflation, right? If you go out in the street and grab 100 people and you ask them what inflation means, really, 100 is probably not even the right number. It'd probably take about 10,000 people for someone to give you the right answer. But most people say inflation is things are getting more expensive. That's what inflation means, right? The value of things is going up. And that is not the official definition, right? The official definition of inflation is more excess currency has been put into circulation. And this is such an important point to understand, right? This is why things cost more money is because they've diluted the currency supply. Yeah, that makes sense?
Uh, yeah, I hope it makes sense to people listening. Like, I really hope so. I really hope that everyone who listens to this just totally gets this, that they, if there's a certain amount of money and they print more,
Currency,
then the money that you have is worth less because
right?
the total is bigger. So your
Because it's
money doesn't
currency,
reflect as much value anymore.
right? If I'm making widgets and selling them for $10, right, and then 100 other guys make the same widgets and sell them for $9, and then another 100 guys and jump in and they sell them for $8, right? Pretty soon, everybody's making widgets, and so the price of widgets is going to come down because there's more available on the market and people making them for less and less money, right? So now that the widgets are plentiful, the price of them is going to come down. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Supply and demand. So if the demand stays the same, supply rises. The only way that I'm going to be able to sell my supplies is if I lower the price against my competitors. It's the same idea with this. There's more dollars floating around. They have less value. And that's what inflation is. So we have this entity called the Federal Reserve. You may have heard people say it's neither federal nor does it have a reserve. Technically, it is very federal if we use Webster's 1828 dictionary, right? Federal is defined as contract. So we have a contract with a private corporation, and that contract was quite unlawfully created between the United States of America government corporation and these private international bankers, and they get to print this fiat currency out of thin air. Most people have heard that they're printing money out of thin air. From a legal standpoint, they're allowed to do that, and they've been doing it for since 1913 or 1914. So really, it's been 110 years. They've been legally, unlawfully, but legally, just printing up this currency out of thin air. And we're not going to spend any time going over how this all went down. There's a million videos on YouTube. G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, is probably the most famous that goes over how this all happened. But what happened was they just sidestepped what in our Constitution suggested that Congress was the only body or entity that could control the money supply in the United States. And that was with the usage of gold and silver that they had in their treasury. That all went to, you just throw it out the window with the Federal Reserve Act. And that is literally what brought this into being. It was an act. So the Federal Reserve is all an act. And it works because we all buy it because we're ignorant. Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're like, I'm not, I sometimes wonder what percentage of people know this, but like if everyone knew it, it totally wouldn't fly.
That's right.
Like most people would just think that things get more expensive because like the businesses are in like a price war, trying to get more money, right? But it's just not like that. Like they're printing money. They're printing money and they're
Currency.
they they're able to they're sure they're able to print it because nobody knows what's happening.
We're
Just
ignorant. That's
sit behind closed doors and just put
right.
some digits in your bank account and no one knows.
That's why I said at the top, right? It's the Babylonian money magic trick. They've been using it, and then Babylonian meaning they've been doing it since recorded history started, right? 5,000 years ago. It's the same trick. They just changed the way it works. But the key to pulling off the trick is that we're ignorant of it. And I was saying to Matt
Right.
that, Penn and Teller's a magical team, two guys that have an act. And Penn has answered, people always want to know how he did the trick. And he doesn't want to reveal how they do their tricks because he said it just ruins everything, right? When you realize this dumb little thing that they do in the middle of it just destroys the beauty of the illusion. And it's the same idea here with this trick. The key, of course, is that we're ignorant of them doing it. And of course, they hire pundits and economic experts and university, financial, and constitutional experts that come on TV. They don't know, they have no idea what they're talking about. They're completely brainwashed and they sell the public on the idea that everything's legit, right?
Yeah, like when you're afraid, like the media will be like, "Oh, the money's not going well. We're gonna be in for tough times," and you're like, "Oh God, am I gonna be able to pay my mortgage?" Like, that means that my monthly income isn't gonna keep up with inflation, and I'm gonna be poor, right? Like you get afraid. When you're afraid, your your reasoning, like faculty, your rational faculty, just doesn't function correctly. And you then outsource your intellectual sovereignty to authorities, right? So first they make you afraid, and then they put in a authority, and a university declared, decreed authority, right? And they say something about how the government's gonna use a financial easing or some weird term that you don't understand, and how inflation's a good thing and we're targeting 2%, and they're going to ease the money supply and there's going to be more money in circulation so people are, able to do better. And you're like, oh, okay, that sounds good. Cool. I guess it's good that the government's taking care of everything and doing all this money printing to make I'm
Right.
sorry, to make things better.
Currency printing. Yeah, I want to slip in currency, not to pick on Matt, but he keeps saying money. But nothing would make me happier than for all of us to switch to saying currency rather than money. That's right. The inflation they've got us all sold on the idea that inflation is normal, right? It's not natural by any means, as displayed by the bumper script we went over, right? All things should be less expensive today than they were 10, 50, 100 years ago because of the improvements in the production of goods and services that humanity has come up with over the years. But they got their experts and their Federal Reserve guy and the economic pundits on MSNBC and CNBC, and they all, yep, 2% inflation. We're doing great. And
Mhm.
what they've done is they've taken the current floating currency supply, whatever they say it is, and let's say it's $200 trillion or whatever, I mean, whatever it is, 10 trillion, whatever the number is, and they take 2% of that and they give that money to all their pals, that currency, right? That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure some people are under the impression that like the government prints the money and then like puts it back into the economy. So like some pretend act as if like they actually do something valuable with it, but
Sure.
they don't do anything. Like they do a little bit so that they can point to it and say, yeah, look at the stuff we've done. But that's like this minute fraction of where all this money really goes.
Right. 2% of the circulating global currency supply is a massive amount of currency, and they just deposited it into their friends and buddies' bank accounts. That's all they're doing.
Right.
So that's lowering the value of the currency you have in your bank account. Right.
Right.
So I say you've been saving up for 10 years to retire, right? And every year you save whatever, $20,000. And, by the time, if you save $20,000 over the course of 10 years, let's say it's $200,000, what looks like $200,000 on paper, but because of this inflation, right? Now it's no longer 200,000, and now it's, $141,000 is what it's worth now, right? So they've just stole your money. It's legal theft. That's what inflation is.
Right.
And of course,
Rightio. So you got more to say on that?
I was going to say, just to finish off this point, they don't want you to understand this. That's all it is. If you understood it, then it'd all be over. The trick would end.
Yeah. Like if you're unafraid, first be unafraid. When you're unafraid, you'll have total power of your rational faculty and you'll perceive what's going on in any sector of life easily.
Right. You just have to know that there's a trick. Right? And I think everybody knows
Yeah.
something's going on. They just don't understand how stupid it is and how easy it is to see if you go and look for it. Right? It's not complicated,
Right.
as Penn and Teller suggests, right? They have put together a 15-minute spectacle magic trick, or David Copperfield, right? And he makes a jet disappear, right? It takes an hour, right? The 1 hour magical presentation, he probably gets paid $10 million for that, TV show. And there's just one little trick that makes the jet disappear, right? Like they change cameras or they put a mirror
Yeah.
in, that, what I mean? It's when you see
This is
what
like
he
one
did.
second. It's like, here, he did this. And you're like, oh,
Right.
simple.
Right. You're like, oh my God, that guy just made $10 million and all he did was change camera angles or whatever, right? They
Mhm.
pointed a mirror at a different background or, something just so unbelievably stupid. And that's all this is. That's what's going on. So let's keep it rolling here though. So yeah, value of the fiat dollar, right? So this is a little tricky. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but in 1933, the Roosevelt confiscated all the gold in America. You had literally were supposed to bring your gold in to the government and give it to them, and then they valued the gold at $35 an ounce, and they would give you Federal Reserve notes in exchange for that. And technically speaking, you could exchange those Federal Reserve notes for gold up until 1971 when Nixon uh, destroyed the convertibility of the two. But it was illegal to own gold in all that period. I don't think you could own gold as an American until like 1977 or something. But theoretically, the fiat dollar still had that convertibility value. Like nations, France is notorious for exchanging their Federal Reserve notes for gold, the gall. And this is what slowly caused us to say we can't do this anymore because we're printing currency out of thin air and everybody knew it. But that was, as of 1971, officially, the Federal Reserve note, otherwise known as dollars or money, was completely and utterly worthless. Intrinsically, as Matt likes to say. Yeah?
Yeah. We even right intrinsically valueless. Like there's nothing you can do with it. Right? Like if you got gold, you can use gold for jewelry, you can use gold for electronics,
A
various
million different
uses,
things. Right.
chemical things, right? But let's see you do something of any value with a piece of paper or a digit in your bank account.
Right.
So
And
they
a
know
lot,
this, right?
right. A lot of people have pointed to the erosion of the value of the US dollar, Federal Reserve note, since 1913. Say it's 99% eroded. And that's fair to say, right? Like back then, you could buy, a bottle of Coke for a penny, right? And now it's, I don't know what at a convenience store, it's like 350 for a plastic can of Coke. But that's just, it's like the Zimbabwe thing, right? Where they have $1 trillion bills now. And they just keep devaluing and devaluing by printing extra currency when they need it. So, the worthlessness of it isn't seen by the public until such a point where they can't afford to meet their basic needs. Then they finally see that it's worthless, but they're so brainwashed and ignorant of how it all happened that they go along with the next thing that the cabal government is proposing. Why wouldn't they, right? So the Babylonian money magic tricksters taking full advantage of everybody's ignorance of their trick. Yeah?
Yeah. Are we about to go into this nature of this stealing?
Sure, sure.
All right, let me lay this out, all right? So, we've been focusing on the US dollar. And see, okay, US dollar is introduced, yeah? And over time, the value of that US dollar to you is just poof, right? They just took it all, right? Like 99% of it, at least, they just taken it, right? Like your labor, and the dollar, that thing there is like a representation of the value of your labor, right? So over the period of that time, they just took that value of your labor. Yeah, would you agree with that, Brad? That 99% erosion of the dollar represents a 99% taking of the value of your labor over that time?
Yeah, well, what happens then is that everybody needs to get raises, right? So that's in order to hide the deception, right? If you go back 100 years, you could probably live handsomely in the United States earning, say, $5,000 a year, probably lived a good life. And today, right, you need to earn $100,000 a year or whatever, right, to live a good life. So it's
Sure.
they have to compensate all over, and they've compensated with real estate and other things going, everything why does real estate go up, for example, right? Doesn't. It should go
Hmm.
down, right? It should, houses fall apart over time. So technically a house value should drop, but they've, used a lot of different um, financial instruments and property and so forth to make it seem like they're not stealing from us by raising the apparent value of things that should be lowering in value, like literally an inversion, the opposite. And just to make it clear about this point, that when the dollar was defined in 1792, right, 371 grains of silver, it was still, and up until 1912, 1913, it was still the same value, right? 371 grains of silver. So nothing had changed. Whatever you could buy for a silver dollar in 1792, you could buy the same thing in 1912. And there's a neat article about Coca-Cola. Actually, it was a nickel, I think, is when they first came out with Coca-Cola, like 1880s or something. And it was a nickel all the way up until 1972. So for 100 years, you could buy a can of Coke for a nickel, bottle of Coke for a nickel, and then we decoupled from gold, and then it went up to a dime, and then quarter, and on and on and on. Yeah,
Hmm. There's a extra point within the labor fact as well, because like you mentioned, okay, 5,000 back then, 100,000 now, but like think about the labor part of it as well, like what you were doing back then to earn your money, like basic stuff, right? Like just do this, do that, really simple stuff, just hand to hand, like go up to a cow, go like that, milk goes in, take the milk somewhere. But now imagine you're so empowered by the transformation in transportation, extraction, production, as we mentioned before, that you're doing all this miraculous stuff, moving, moving so much more milk, delivering so much more value to people. But the actual value that you receive back, because it's gone through this currency that it's been eroded in value, what you're getting is no longer like
it's the
is no
same,
longer represented, right?
right? It's the same. It's the same in your quality of life, right? So you've improved
Yeah,
your
you've missed
ability
out
to,
on that. Yeah, you
yeah,
haven't received it. Like all this wonderful improvements that have happened, you haven't benefited from it. You
right. They
just get
didn't
like
go to you,
basically the same.
right? They didn't go to the laborers. They went to the parasites that control the financial system.
Right.
They stole it all. They took it and they sit around and play golf and lay around their mansions and let you
Hmm.
continue, right? You continue to get better at milking cows faster, easier, more milk, more distributors, everything goes up, but yet you're still just getting by, the dairy farmer.
Right. Right. So you kind of got to look past the actual currency and realize that what's been stolen isn't, numbers. What's been stolen from you is the benefit of your labor.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's why we said in the beginning that this is like human sacrifice. Like
Exactly.
we're not like commies and say we're saying just because they're capitalists and own the business. It's not that. Like we're saying because they literally steal the money. Okay? Like whoa.
Right. That's right. They steal your labor, your energy, your value, and that's how they live. They're parasites in a short way. Parasitic theft, what we call it.
Okay. And now for the turn, right? Because we've established this for the US dollar, right? So now we go into COVID and we introduce the point that you may want to recall one of the goals of this ruling cabal is to have a one world currency, right? For example, the euro was a progress toward one world currency. They, abolished a
Hmm.
bunch of currencies there in Europe and got that part under just one currency. Okay. So with COVID, a lot of the plan there was to use that to just totally just really put the nails in the coffin of this US dollar, right? Just take out all the value of it and then switch over to a one world currency, right? So just deplete that entire thing, just take everything it could possibly have to offer, and then switch over to a new, nice, brand new currency as a vehicle to now begin picking out the value of that one. Remember, we said US dollars already down 99%, smash it to pieces, and then go on a new one, start picking it out. So let us just read a little script about how that would happen. There, one day they would have said, "Oh, the economy's just so bad. We need to fix it with a global currency. We've got lots of great academic scientists who have, advanced degrees in financial policy and economics, and they've determined that this is the best way to do it. We've had to print trillions to keep businesses afloat and help people, and now the U.S. dollar is just falling apart. Therefore, there's a need for a new financial system, something to lead us into the future." And basically, there's an exchange rate. You don't have to do anything. You just leave your money in the bank, and your old currency will be converted into this great new global currency. Wouldn't that be great, Brad, if they could just eliminate all the problems that COVID caused, and this amazing government could just save us with a
Right.
new global currency?
Right. It's funny I haven't said it, but there's no such thing as government. It's a fictional entity, and of course, there's no such thing as economy. Right. It's just a made-up thing. I just had to throw that in there. But yeah, and to be clear on Matt's point, all the major national currencies are pegged to the U.S. dollar, meaning their value is tied to the value of the U.S. dollar. So the U.S. dollar has functioned as the world reserve currency, right, since Bretton Woods in 1944. So, but it's still complicated, right? There's still euros and pounds and Swiss francs and all the other national currencies and those are tied to all these problems with how they were tied to grains of silver and ounces of gold and all these old values that these things used to have. So there's still this confusion and frustration with all this. But when they get to the world reserve currency or the central bank digital currency, CBDC, all those problems are gone with one stroke of a pen. And they get to start from scratch, value it as they want. They can make US dollars convert at this rate, and Venezuelan bolivars convert at that rate, and Indian rupees convert at this rate. They get to choose all these conversions. And at that point, they've got total and complete control. Not that they don't already have it in most ways, but once it goes completely digital, you could throw everything out the window. They've got everybody trapped. Yeah?
Yeah. And we did also just write down some evidence just in case you were doubtful. Like, did they really want to do a, world currency? Great reset. They were on about this great reset. Oh my God, they never stopped talking about it. Like, great reset. Yeah, that's what it is. Discussion of the CBDC. They never let up about it. They just started talking about it, just blaring it through megaphones all across the world. They started saying phrases like, "You'll own nothing and you'll be happy by 2030." And suddenly, a lot of like international financial bodies were like suddenly relevant, like global, worldwide, let's say, economic and financial bodies, right? Like the World Economic Forum just popped onto the scene into everyone's consciousness all of a sudden, and Klaus Schwab was like just paraded all over the world. So they were really like starting to get us focused on like this global, financial system and currency.
Right. And they're still trying, right? All this is still going on, right? It didn't take like they hoped it would, right? In the tail end of COVID. But they're still trying, and they're going to keep trying. They have to. They have no choice. But something's happened. Right?
Right. Like it seemed like it was going that way. Right. Like I remember sitting around thinking that they were going to get total control and I was going to have to get Russian citizenship and go live in Russia in Siberia and wait it all out and just be safe. That,
Siberia.
that's how afraid I was. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when it all just, I don't know when this was. Like, it was probably honestly before even COVID that I started thinking like that. I don't know. But they really got us thinking that like things were really going to go some bad way, and like it really seemed to be impending doom, did it not?
Yeah, I mean, and one of the points I want to make is it was coming from everywhere. It was coming from the mainstream and it was coming from the alternative media and the conspiracy theorists. Everybody was panicking and how are we going to fight this and how are we going to defeat this? Right? It was they had the narrative flowing real nice, especially in 2022 for sure, and part of 2023. But it was at a fever pitch there for a while for people who were paying attention. Right. So yeah, and it's lost a lot of steam, hasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of steam.
Right. So
Uh,
the
it even seems to like, in a way, appear like a bit of a backfire. Like people are anti-establishment more than ever now.
right trust in media is dropping every day. Trust in the government is dropping every day. Trust in Congress is dropping every day. Like all so they can't. And this is so the question is why didn't they pull it off? Because they pulled off COVID, right? I mean, they had 90% of the population go along with it. And there was no reason to think they couldn't continue with their great reset. And it was the perfect timing, right? What better explanation? I mean, the only thing the only thing that would be better would be like a world war, right? Which is how they reset the currency after World War II. So if they can't get a world war cooking, then this COVID thing was as close to a world war as you can get. And frankly, a lot better. And they didn't pull it off. And now COVID's gone and no one's afraid of it anymore. And, the whole narrative of COVID has vanished. Businesses are back online and they're not giving away money to the citizens. And yet here we are without a reset of any kind. So how do they fail? That's the question I have. And I put forth a few answers. I don't know whether people are going to buy it or not, but I think that, well, let me say this too, that um, again, I listened to a bunch of really smart financial pundits and gurus over the years, economic gurus, and I bought into what they showed was clear evidence to me that the economy is going to crash on this date, or it's going to be within 6 months or 2 years, or 5 years or 10 years. I've been listening to that for 15, 16 years now. And every one of these guys has been wrong. And they don't know how they were wrong because it sure looked like they were right. Now, it's important to note that the Federal Reserve invents these new financial vehicles and bailout packages and all these other things to stop what was clearly something that was going to blow up the financial system. So if they're able to do that and just make up whatever to put a band-aid on these problems, then we can't look to the financial gurus and their charts and graphs for the answers. And I think that the reason that the financial collapse that they wanted to happen during COVID hasn't happened is because not enough people bought into it. What do you think, Matt?
It's definitely a tough one, right? It's like one of the big things going on. Definitely hard to know for sure whether what happened, know for sure what happened. However, it certainly does seem that has happened big time. Human consciousness since COVID has raised faster than I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I've been tracking it for a long time, like since I was 18. So I've been tracking human consciousness since, Facebook started or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen it explode as fast as in the past few years. It's just absurd. It's like this exponential growth. Like even people on TikTok, like, that you would usually associate as the social media platform that has like the, let's say, uh, lowest consciousness vibration. Even people there are like just exploding in consciousness and awareness of what's going on. So
Right.
something's happening.
Right. We haven't done a podcast on this yet. I've dropped the hints at it a few times. probably deserving of a full podcast, but the idea that we get from the metaphysical, spiritual, new age channeling resources and so forth is that reality is created, right? Collective reality is created by our combined consciousness, right? So our combined fear or our combined love, our combined anger or our combined compassion, right? Our combined judgment or our combined understanding, whatever it is, right? All of that contributes to what we see play out in front of us. And if that were true, and I was in control of things and I knew that, then there's one thing I'd want to control more than anything else, and that, of course, would be the media.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can convince the people via the media to believe what I want them to believe so that the reality that I want unfolds.
Yeah, you just offer them a reality, right? Throw in a bit of fear, throw in a bit of judgment, tell them that there's no love in the world,
Well,
and
never,
then
yeah,
go ahead.
not so obviously, right? But,
Not so obviously.
right. The example I was giving Matt when we were writing this is, so say I wanted to cause an economic, and they try to do this in America, certainly with, I know they try to do with chickens and eggs back in 2022, that basically the price of eggs doubled in America. And of course, this cabal government entity subsidizes, chicken farmers, egg farmers, so that they can pull away those subsidies at any time, thus causing the price of eggs to double. And it's just a few little levers they have to pull, right? They can do subsidies for dairy farmers and wheat farmers and, a handful of other things. They don't have to change much. Say, yeah, we're not going to subsidize you guys anymore. So in order for the dairy farmer to survive, he's got to double the price cost of a gallon of milk because he's not getting the government subsidy any longer. So all they got to do is pull a few of these levers, right? Say, hey, we're going into a recession and the economy is looking shaky and things are getting expensive and inflation's on the rise. And they pull these levers, and then we, the ignorant masses, go out and, our grocery bill doubles. And so we start getting scared, and now we cause the recession just like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's
Not hard.
sometimes it's hard to wonder if stuff like that's true. But you just remember there was like the toilet paper thing, like there was no toilet paper on the shelves in COVID because everyone went out and bought toilet paper. Well, obviously there
Right.
was never any toilet paper shortage just to begin with, right? People just got afraid that there was no toilet paper, and then they acted as if there was no toilet paper, and then they went and bought all the toilet paper. I even said to my family, I was like, you better go and buy toilet paper because all these people are going to think there's no toilet paper and they're going to buy it. So you
Right.
better go buy it before they buy it.
Yeah.
Right. So like the toilet paper production didn't drop. People just got afraid that there was no toilet paper and then acted like there was no toilet paper and then there was no toilet paper.
Right. Demand outstrips supply. It's basic economics, right? And that's just one of the many mechanisms. Or, and the cabal could have called up, toilet paper maker X and said, hey, don't send out as much toilet paper next quarter, right? Now, how hard would that be? And of course, the people who did have toilet paper could double, triple, quadruple the price of their toilet paper because people desperately wanted it. Right? So all
Okay.
these economic things go sideways. So yeah, this is all it takes to get a panic started. When we had a big long section on how recessions and depressions happen, and it's all perception. Again, it's what the public perceives, and the cabal can pull a few levers, and that increases the public's perception in the direction that they want them to go.
Right. So I think it's like the more we allow ourselves to be afraid, the more we're going to be, triggered into that fear by the media. And to be triggered into that fear means to act as well. You kind of can't separate the emotion from the action. The emotion always ultimately generates, well, the emotion often generates the action, right? So if you get afraid, you're going to act afraid. And then if they scare you into being afraid of this specific stuff, like the economy crashing and stuff like that, then you'll act like that. Right? And that empowers them, right?
Well,
Like
you give, yeah,
scared actions
right,
direct power towards the cabal.
right? Because they say they have the solution. It's the central bank digital currency. Just let
Right.
us go forward with that, and we'll make everything better for you again, right? So everybody allows the CDBC, and they resubsidize the chicken farmers and the wheat farmers and the dairy farmers, and all of a sudden, eggs and milk and bread aren't so expensive, and they get what they want, and all they had to do was scare us a little bit. And then we
Right.
believe their version of reality into reality. And
It's
there
interesting
were,
that how they have multiple little levers to, first, create the problem with this thing, right? Scare them with that, but then, and then, so they'll accept what we suggest as a solution and then fix it in a different way. And then they'll be like, oh, they fixed it, but then we've got our currency and now we'll just start printing that currency, right? So that's
right.
what we were
Well,
saying before, right? Like after they get that new currency, it's just like, all right, print that to all value. So I think what it seems like they're doing is like introducing one currency after another. Like even before the dollar, there was another currency that they were abusing, and before that, there was another currency they were abusing. And just all through human history, they appear to be just taking the value of your labor right out from under you all the way. Is that how it seems to you?
well, that is right. It's human sacrifice, and that is the way
Right.
that it always goes. And
Ugh.
the lever they control more than any other is the oil, of course, right? They have total control of the oil, and the raising and lowering of the price of oil causes people's expenses to go up and down.
Hmm.
So they
Right.
can just say go oil shortage, or Iran is embargoing their shipments, or yeah, whatever. They just call the leader up of that country and say, "Hey, don't ship as much oil next month." And so the price of
Hmm.
oil goes up, and when the price of oil goes up, everything goes up, right? So there's a million different levers that they can pull to make what they want happen. And they've pulled it off for thousands of years, and it's worked to perfection right up until COVID. And they
Yeah.
had the perfect setup that they could have just absolutely demolished us during COVID. It should have. And it didn't
So
happen.
now it's as if they can pull all their little switches, have the media blare the horns, and people are just like, I'm not going to act in the way you want me to act. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Something is happening where people aren't buying it any longer, or enough people aren't buying it that they are unable to sell their narrative to the masses to get the reality goal they're after. That's what it looks like. And I'm not saying they haven't stopped. They're still trying. And maybe that's the purpose of this podcast, is that it's not over, right? They're still in control of these positions and these levers and these institutions and the currency supply, right? They still have it all in the oil market, right? They still control all these things. But what they don't control is our perception. And that's where they seem to be losing the battle. I can't think of another good explanation. Can you, Matt?
Seems good to me.
We skipped over the 2008 financial collapse. I knew a lot about that. That was my wake up call. I've said that many times. And one of kind of at the tail end of that in America, we had this thing called the TARP bill, where it was a months long drama on the media every night about how they were going to have to go to Congress and ask for $800 billion to bail out the banks, and it was just this huge soap opera. And at the end of 2010, and Ron Paul, of course, dug all this up, and he's as legitimate a resource as you're going to get. Calculated that they actually needed $31 trillion they had to give to all the banks to prevent, complete systemic banking failure. Right. So just a good example of them not letting us know what really happened, how it happened, in order to keep their system going. I don't know if I was making a point there or not. Was I trying to make a point?
I didn't manage to follow it, so I'm perhaps not.
I diverged too far off. I was reading some of the points down here. and they weren't trying to, by the way, they weren't trying to crash the system in 2008, but they did want to foment a recession, which they did, right? It was, I think they called it the Great Recession, 2008, 9, and 10. So it's
Let's call it great, so people really
Mhm.
really buy into it. Good. So
Right.
like we don't want it to just be a recession. Like we want this thing to be a big recession. So attach the word great, and they'll be like, "Whoa, it's a great recession. Whoa, I better really tighten up and act really afraid that I'm gonna
Right.
not have any money."
That's how it'll go down in all the academic textbooks. Of course, the movie The Big Short was a great movie. Documented what a big farce the whole thing was, of course. But the media pundits, financial experts on TV, still give it legitimacy. Of course, it wasn't. It was all orchestrated, clearly. And as was COVID, as was the closing, shuttering of small businesses and the collapse of commercial real estate and offices and the collapse of the travel, hospitality, tourism industry. It was all orchestrated, and they just didn't get what they wanted at the end of it all. And now that we're back to normal, seemingly, they are looking for some way to frighten us into their great reset, and they're not going to stop. And I'm totally hopeful that humanity at large is waking up. They may not understand the Babylonian money magic deception, but they understand that they're being lied to, and they're not buying into the government media narrative any longer. At least enough of them that they aren't able to complete their plans. What do you think?
Right. And I think we can offer as well, like, okay, like we're talking about how to not be afraid and not let them go further. But I think we can also talk about how to reverse this a bit, right? So it's not just to not be afraid. That's not the only thing. Like we have to actually begin to create a better reality, right? Because if we just like, it's not about just going, haha, I'm not going with that central currency. I'm sticking with the US dollar, right? Like that's just a compromise with evil. And when good compromises with evil, evil wins every single time. I think that's from Ayn Rand, my favorite philosopher. Um, so we actually want to start to talk amongst ourselves about how we're going to have things, right? Because at the moment, we just outsource the creation to them, right? The media says it's this way, and the universities are like, yeah, yeah, inflation, we're talking 2%. The government's really good. And we just go along with it, and we don't put any of our creative power into creating a better reality. Like we think that we're doing it by sitting around going, I tell you what, the problem in society is damn billionaires that have all the money. I hate these billionaires. We should get rid of them. Eat the rich, right? That is not anything. That's not the kind of better reality that you want to create. You want to create a very, I don't know how long this is going to take, but you want to work on creating a reality where you've essentially completely turned your back on all of their offerings, and we're literally having a party of awesomeness amongst ourselves where we're freely trading without any silly government coming and take anything, or without any nonsense media blaring across the airwaves and telling us to be afraid of that. Like that stuff's just like not there. Like we want to focus with our backs on them on something completely better, right? Start imagining that up. Start telling your friends and family how it should be, right? It's one thing to kind of like wake people up and tell them, oh, this is bad and you shouldn't go along with what they say, but like you have to tell people a greater vision as well. What do you reckon about that, Brad?
Well, 100%. And that's, how we kind of wanted to finish this and was the purpose of this podcast was that, let's start with this idea. First of all, we don't need government. It's unneeded, right? Humanity has organized itself for millennia without government, right? The government is the thing that comes in and steals, right? And they're the parasites, right? And it's not not the friendly government worker who's your neighbor or your friend that works for, whatever, the ABC administrative office. It's the entity at large, right? They don't give us anything, right? They take from us first, right? Taxes,
Right.
and then they give a little bit back to make it seem like they're doing us a favor, but they're not. So we don't need them. And that's the hopeful message I'm hoping will come across. We certainly don't need the media, right? They do nothing but foment fear and judgment. So once you see we don't need government or media, you'll see that humanity will find a way. So let's say they do pull all their levers and crash, pull subsidies and quadruple the price of oil, just do all these awful things to us, right? We will still find a way, right? Still people are going to, the guy who runs the restaurant still needs to buy stuff. And the guy who, works for the accounting department needs to buy stuff. So humanity will find a way. Like, we don't need their control mechanism solution, right? If you just vanished all fiat currency and government tomorrow, right? It's not like everyone would all of a sudden just starve to death, right? Wherever you are, the people would come together and they would find a way to compensate each other in order to keep living as they did in the past, and find ways to exchange value so that everybody would be happy and healthy and harmonious, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what happens
And
if they,
even better than like like the way you're saying like we'll find a way is like implies that like oh it's going to be really bad but and there'll be a lot of struggle. Like I don't think we even need to go that far. Like we can just envision like things are going to get better and better and so awesome as we turn on our backs on the government, media, and academic institutions more and more and create our own thing.
yeah, I mean, imagine a world where farmers and ranchers and gardeners, were the wealthy people instead of politicians and lawyers and university professors, right? And that's a sane world, right? Because we all need to eat, right? So unless you're going to learn how to, dairy farm and raise livestock and grow wheat, right? The most valuable person in the world to you is the person that produces the food,
Hmm.
right? So we would have this
Yep.
rebalance of these are the people that are valuable in society, not
Yeah.
not these crazy parasites and thieves that pretend like they're of value to us. And yeah, we'll find a way. It's not one way, right? We'll probably find tens of thousands of different ways. Right here on the Hawaiian Islands, it may be, based on taro roots is the unit of currency or whatever, right? Or mahi mahi fillets. Who knows what it is, right? But they'll find a way. Everybody will find a way. We'll help each other, right? We'll be good to each other, and we'll say, all right, well, here's how you earn your mahi mahi fillets, right? You have to come down here and dig these holes, or row these boats, or whatever it is. Humanity will find a way because that's how it works now, right? Humanity has found all these jobs and roles and duties for people to do in order to make a living. And it'll be the same when with the fake fiat currency system and government and cabal not trying to control it all so they can parasitically steal from us. We'll, we'll
Right
find a
on.
way.
And
And
just to quantify how good it will be, uh, imagine the year 1924 compared to 2024 and the how incredible the surge in technology was, right? The thing is, we didn't get any of that benefit because they took it all. So imagine if going forward, instead of them taking it all, we actually get all of that. Like imagine the
yeah,
transformation from 1924 to 2024, how good that was. And then imagine that applying to your own life.
yeah.
Okay,
Us
that's what's
realizing the
possible.
benefits. Yeah, right. Each one of us, right, as a sovereign, independent individual, realizes the benefits of his own work. There's no intermediary middleman
Right,
managing what value you can generate and
right.
receive. So this is what the new age channeling, metaphysical sources are all saying is we're moving in that direction as a collective consciousness, right? Where we become sovereign again. We take back our power
Hmm.
and forget about these parasitic organizations that are stealing from us. Literal human sacrifice. And by the way, that's if you go back to real Babylonian times, They were literally doing human sacrifice, right? Blood sacrifice. And this is just a different form of human sacrifice by stealing our labor. That's the same thing that's happening. The violation of free will. Yeah?
Spot on, mate.
Yeah. Good place to end, I think. So hopefulness, optimism, positivity, no matter what the media or the government has to say, the more of us that maintain that position, that humanity will find a way, and we don't need their solution, the better off we're going to be. These are the vibrations that I'm asking people to put out. Is regardless of what the media has to say, you recognize they're trying to scare you into moving into their new system of parasitic theft and control, and don't buy into it, and just understand that we're going to find a way to get through their currency, banking, economic nonsense that they've thrown at us for all these years. The more of us thinking that way, the less chance they have of succeeding. And the less chance they have of succeeding, the better chance we have of living happy, healthy, harmonious lives. It's as simple as that. Oh, and all it is really is just not being fearful. Don't buy what they're selling. That's my hope and my message. What do you say, Matt?
Spot on. Just create your own reality with your friends and family instead of doing what the government and the media tells you to.
Take your power back. Forget about them. Don't give it to them. There you have it.
Yeah.
All right, we're right on
It's
an
simple.
hour. Unbelievably simple. All right, mate.
All
That
righty.
was a good one. I'm glad we got her squeezed into an hour, and I hope everybody benefits from hearing this a little bit. Don't be scared, whether it's the conspiracy theorists, the media, the alternative media, whoever it is. Don't let them scare you. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Stay positive.
Be positive. It's the Be Positive movement on the Mind Blown Zone.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Hey, I'm glad we got this one done. Thanks for all your contributions and inquisitive questions as always, Matt. And thanks everybody for listening. And we will
All right.
catch you on the next podcast.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye bye.